Moon Songs in celebration of 50 years. 19 July 1969 moon landing. It was the broken reed that started it all. Such a little thing, such an important little thing, when there were absolutely none left. I knew I had a carton. I'd been so careful. Odin took it, no doubt about it. He was forever pulling pranks like that. Normally it didn't bother me, but this gig was way too important for screwing around. Damn, I said after I'd torn the room apart and still couldn't find it. I needed something hot and stimulating, and my husband was still asleep. The smell of fresh kefesk drifted into our sleeping quarters, and I stamped in that direction. We will not forfeit, I thought as I grabbed a cup and poured. We were the first performers in a huge show for dignitaries from all over the world. In 3 days, March 30th, 2203, we would be performing at the welcoming ceremony for the brand new moon colony. I barely tasted the lovely brew as my brain raced to find a solution. We were the only jazz band in the lineup, but someone had to have baritone reeds, didn't they? I'd probably have to pay every script for it, but I had to have it. But first, Odin Trinstar Canción, I yelled. Our pod was small, only 150 meters, standard for a family of 4. I knew if he was somewhere inside, he would hear me. No luck, not that I expected it. The lights were already at dawn setting, and Odin was probably up and long gone before the gentle programmed wake-up. I snorted in irritation and took another sip. It was a tight fit in our pod, but the chance to be here on the moon made it worthwhile. Being a family helped since we could smooth differences fast. The hardest part was finding a place to jam. We ended up using the commons for practice, which was less than ideal. Pod dwellers are endlessly curious and opinionated. They wandered in and out to watch, so it was hard to focus. Since we didn't want to spoil the show, we really didn't get a chance to practice our lineup until they opened the assembly dome. That was today. That meant we had 3 days to get it right until showtime. I took another sip and blessed the hydroponics crew that made this magical blend possible. After the coffee crops had failed in the late 2190s, it became impossible to find it or anything even remotely like it as a healthful substitute. I had a vivid memory of my own mother complaining about tea. Someone boiled a sock and called it tea. This is what we're left with? Oh, what a world. She and my dad laughed, but they were quite grumpy for a few weeks after their last precious bit of coffee ran out. My father was a hydroponics engineer. Because he loved my mother and because he missed coffee, he and his team came up with this kefesk coffee substitute. It had all the health properties of the best rooibos teas and a rich, dark, and somewhat bitter taste that my parents claimed was even better than coffee. I would never know. I had never tasted coffee, but I did remember the smell. I loved the smell of the freshly ground beans. As a child, whenever my mother opened the grinder, I would inhale it deeply. When my dad brought her the first cup of kefesk, my mother started dancing around the kitchen like a lunatic. I smiled as I remembered. Weirdo, I said with fondness. You are, my husband Cyrus assured me. I turned and smiled at him. The drummer in our band, my best friend, and even morning disheveled, he was head to toe sexy. I grinned. Hey, you. He kissed me. Kefesk. Must get 1 second. I nodded and watched him pour a cup. His light brown hair was long and hung to his mid-back. I loved the way his hair looked unbound like this. Mine was short and shaved exactly the way I liked it. I'd probably let the shaved designs grow in after the big show. They cost too much script to maintain without knowing a good hair specialist to barter with. Ah, he said. He closed his eyes and took a sip. So, he looked at me and smiled. Who's a weirdo besides present company? I smiled at him. Well, I was thinking about coffee, I said, the way it smelled. Oh yeah. Do you miss the smell? He asked, curious. Nah, the VR data library has every scent on record, and even though it's a fabricated estimate, it's so close I would never know the difference. I was just thinking about my folks, really. He came over and put his arm around me. They're gonna miss you, Ev. Grammy Evie will too. I laughed. She's skiing in the Hawaii mountains. She's not gonna miss me anytime soon. She'll get here when she's ready, if she ever is. So much to explore, darling, I said, quoting her. Well, she is one of the founders of this entire mission, my husband said. Still, why stick yourself on the moon when there's at least 10% of the world she hasn't yet explored? She loves us? Maybe, I smiled. I was secretly hoping she would come. Next to my guys, she was my favorite person in the world. I was named to her and had felt a special bond with her because of it. I hugged him. You miss your folks too, babe? Yep. We both turned and looked out the portal at the same time. The earth was just setting and barely visible in the fabricated lunar light. Anyway, we need to find Odin so I can kill him. Again? My youngest son, Mag, was awake now and heading for the kafes pot. What did he do this time? He hid my reeds. Oh, Mag's carefully blank tone had me instantly alert. You know where they are, don't you? I asked. He refused to meet my gaze and simply shrugged. Seriously, this is not phase. Deal, I said sternly. I need them. I broke the last one. He turned and faced me with a grin that said, Look at me. I'm way too cute to be mad at. We could all usually get each other to laugh away any annoyance, but this was too important, and besides, I was already on edge about the big show. Come on. Deal. I might have used a pack of reeds to build a new saltwater fish filter, Mag admitted, not meeting my eyes. What? Because the fish would have died, Mom. My filter failed and the only other one in the colony is in use, by the chairman's son, by the way. No way I was getting it. Unfazed, I said. Are there any left? He looked slightly panicked. I really thought you had more. Arms crossed, I stared at him in disbelief. Mom, sorry. I was floating, jacked in. Time passed. Next thing I knew, all the reeds were used up. But hey, I saved a fish. He grinned at me, but stopped when he saw my face. I needed air. I carefully put my cup down and headed outside. Not that the air was much different out here, but at least I didn't have to worry about hyperventilating in an enclosed space. Jacked in and floating. I took a long, deep breath. We all did it. Music kept us sane, and with the implants, it was all available at any time. The mood response music was healing and rejuvenating, and if we combined the right songs, we could replenish our entire bodies with just a few hours of floating. Not that we literally floated. We could do anything jacked in, even apparently build fish filters from saxophone reeds. The term floating came from the induced REM and pineal gland response that created a light floating feeling in our bodies. I sat down on the step and stroked the petals of the newly planted rose bush. It released a beautiful rainbow scent. I had no idea how I was going to get through the next 3 days, especially without my reeds. I sighed and stared at the fading and beautifully fabricated dawn. The sax had been a parting gift from my parents. The best Bonner baritone sax that money could buy. Both my parents were jazz musicians too, but for them it was a hobby. It became my passion from the first notes I heard. So they tell me. And probably pre-birth, they told me they had to keep the radio set to jazz playing in my room for me to fall asleep. I met Cyrus during my second year at the Music Academy. His shy smile and skill as a musician were a very intoxicating combination. Because I had always been an introvert and very focused on my music, I had had little time for romance. Cyrus was my first and only love. We toured with friends in a jazz band and made a decent living. When our sons were born, they gravitated naturally to music. My oldest son, Odin, sat down at the keyboard one day and found his muse. After only 2 years of lessons, he could play as well or better than his instructor, and was composing his own music. We weren't sure for a while if Mag would turn out to be a musician. He had an amazing gift for memorization and a beautiful singing voice, but he was more into VR LARPing with his girlfriend. He also had something that most intensely focused shredders usually had to have surgery to achieve, a detached pinky. That meant he could bend his pinky to his palm without any of the other fingers bending. Very handy for a guitarist. One day he picked up the guitar we bought him for his 16th birthday and started playing. After that he rarely put it down. He was a wizard. Both boys were. When the boys were 17 and 19, we began touring. Because we all loved the ancient jazz masters, we named our band Some Kind of Love. The sum was for our four names, Cirrus, Odin, Magnus, and Evie, and Kind of Love was of course an homage to Miles Davis and John Coltrane, Kind of Blue and Love Supreme. Just then I spotted Odin loping up the path, his shirt soaked from his early morning run. "Hey, Rental, why the gloom?" He plopped down next to me. I laughed at the word rental. My father's work with hydroponics was what led us to audition as the official first Moon Colony jazz band. We'd arrived a month ago. It was a great honor, and when we learned we'd been chosen, we couldn't believe our luck. Cirrus kept up a steady pow zoom to the moon patter, and that was what started it. Soon we were all quoting moon puns at each other. When we ran out of material, Odin haunted the library site for old 20th century movies. In one, aliens called their parents parental units, thus his current favorite nickname, Rental. It also made it sound like it was a temporary solution, which tickled him even more. "Reeds," I said inside. "Yeah," he said, "I hate 'em too." I laughed and play punched his shoulder. "Sax reeds," I said. I frowned. "They're gone." "Ow, man, watch it." He rubbed his shoulder. "All that VR sword swinging gave you muscles. That hurt. A little." He grinned at me. "Good." I shook my head and frowned. "What?" he asked. "If you had been your brother, it would have hurt. He used all my reeds to make a fish filter." "That naghead," Odin scoffed. "What's the problem?" "That was it. I'm out." I frowned again. "I'm going to have to take the first shuttle to the assembly just to beg every musician for one reed. Otherwise, we'll be pulled before we start, and Humble's group will get top billing." "Ma, nah, no way. You can do it even without a reed. Just blow really hard." He grinned at me, pleased with his joke. I sighed, not to be jollied, and rested my head on my knees. It was, as I had said, unfazed, and I was unjoyed. "Mom?" Odin smiled at me. Be right back." He jumped up and ran inside. The sunlights were growing stronger. There was warmth in the air and the beginnings of a breeze. The environmental artists were so good at this. In less than a minute, Odin was back. He sat down beside me and handed me a fresh cup. "Thanks," I said. "That was nice." "Yeah, I'm your favorite, you can say it." Mag joined us and sat on the rail. "Hardly. I'm the one with brains and beauty." Cirrus wandered out with a steaming cup of kefesk. "What's this about favorites?" he asked. "If anyone is a favorite, it's me. I was first." Odin rolled his eyes and Mag laughed. "Here, Mom," Odin said. "Happy early birthday." He handed me the birthday box. It was sturdy steel and big enough to hold a large cat. It was painted black metal with chrome latches and had many dents and decorations accumulated over the years. It had been used for every birthday in our family since I could remember. "What?" I stared at him. "Look inside." He laughed. I opened the lid. Inside were 4 20-piece cartons of saxophone reeds. "I bought them before we left," he said. He smiled at me and shrugged. I grabbed him and hugged him. I couldn't speak, or I would either burst into tears or start laughing so hard I wouldn't be able to stop. "Okay, Mom, thanks. You can let go now," Odin said, laughing. Cirrus smiled at me. 50 is the new Google." We all stared at him blankly. He just shrugged and grinned. "So I'm almost eternal and beyond ancient?" I asked. I smiled. I felt myself relax for the first time all day. "Think you'll make it to 190 like great-grandmom Evie?" Odin asked. "I hope so," I said. "She's going to make 200 at least," Cirrus said. I nodded and smiled. Grandma Evie, my favorite legend. The sky was a spectacular, endless array of diamonds on black velvet. The earth was full and wide in our view. All around us was colorful debris, left after the lavish show our Moon Colony entertainment artists had performed. It had gone flawlessly. The sound from my newly reeded sax was rich and smooth. My sons took the improvs, and I laid down a solid underbeat. My foot still tapped to Cirrus's rolling rhythm that had had everyone up and dancing in the earthlight. It had been a magical night. I was tired and full joy. Cirrus rubbed my back, and we watched our boys drape bunting on the nymph in the fountain. We were the last ones in the hall. "A horse," Cirrus murmured. "Where?" I blinked. He laughed. A horse, my kingdom for a horse. Remember that from literature studies?" I stared at him blankly. "Uh-huh. You would have traded your kingdom for a sax reed." I nodded. "I would have traded you for a sax reed." "Hey now." I smiled and kissed him.